And what I want to do in the teaching moment, which I like to move to, is I want to talk about let's get down to it. What actually happens with the hand, why this can happen, what you need to look at. I'm going to give you some ways to diagnose it and solutions, and I just want to get right into that. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah, let's go. Run right into it.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, if you own my elbow book, I'm going to want you to turn to page 14, and you're going to see and or go to my Angel Borrelli Pitching on YouTube. We're going to have a photo up, and it's a photo that was provided for me for my book from ASMI. And the reason why I have these photos up is because they really elicit or elucidate the way the ball is in the hand and the way it ends up coming out of the hand. They're great photos, even though the purpose of these photos were for other reasons. It just happened to show the hand. So there are three things that the ball does, and I'm going to be talking about pitching, but for especially the team that has a great player who is having problems with this, but also the fact he's having hitting problems. When you have an injury in your hand and you're holding an implement the size of a bat, and you have an injury in the finger that maybe is undiagnosed, you want to carefully look at the grip on the bat and also watch that grip as it goes through the swing. You're going to have to use cameras because if you have an injury, it's going to change the way you're holding whatever you're holding. You're not going to apply enough force. And that lack of force on a moving object that you have to actually put into the object, whether it's a ball or a bat, is going to change, and it will cause a lack of successive performance. So this guy here, that's why when I read hitting and throwing, I'm like, what? Of course he's got an injury. Something's going on. It could be so micro, and it could be just overstretchness, but there's ways to figure this out. But you got to at least be thinking this way. And, there's a lot of you geniuses on all these teams. If I give you just a little bit of information, maybe you can mix that with what you already know and, save these guys from losing their job. And that's what I'm hoping happens from this episode. So page 14 in the book, if you have it, or go to my YouTube channel. So here's what happens on the pitcher. So when the arm is in full external rotation, and everyone can picture some of the great pitchers where their forearm is laying back and it's parallel to the ground, the ball is in the hand at that place. That ball holding position is the first place that the hand and fingers have to apply pressure to the ball. And they have to apply it in a certain way because as they're moving forward into acceleration, if they don't have the right grip on that ball in that position, then the ball is going to be too loose as it starts to roll. So let's talk about the three things that happen. You'll see in the first photo at the top, you'll see the ball is in the hand. We're going to call that the ball holding position. Okay. He's holding the ball. The second thing that happens as he accelerates is the ball begins to roll up to the fingertips. And by the way, the thumb is the first finger that loses its positioning on the ball. It's the shortest. It rolls up to the fingertips. And you'll see in the bottom photo that the ball is actually on the fingertips. So obviously, if you look at the top photo, you'll see that the ball is held closer to the wrist. And of course, it's at the fingertips. So we know it moves from a handheld position up to the fingertips. It rolls its way up. And when that happens, the first two joints that are working when the ball rolls up are those little knuckles you see in the fingers. Then, as the ball is abruptly going to go from the acceleration to the release, then you bring in that knuckle joint. So the knuckle joint then and the two joints in the fingers then abruptly, very abruptly, lets go of that control of the ball that it had while the ball was moving forward. So we've got the balls being held in the hand. It moves into acceleration. The fingers start to allow the ball to roll up. And just as it's up at the right place, the wrist and that big knuckle joint, along with the finger joints, releases the ball. The fingers now are doing a very reactive type of contraction. That's all you need to know. They do something that we don't see in most activities where you go through a double cycle of contraction and then the ball is gone. If you have someone who's releasing the ball out of the tips and it's moving upward, and it's like the guy we talked about, Joe, where I said it was going over the catcher's head.
Right.
That guy was releasing the force he needed to have on the ball. And by the way, everyone, I think you already know this. When I'm talking, I'm not making this up. I read research. Researchers are always looking at how things are happening. My job is to connect how it affects performance and how things work on a motion level. So what I read, and the only ones that have really looked at things like this are biomechanists, they're geniuses. And I'll tell you, the research is, I mean, you can't sleep. I can't sleep when I'm studying this kind of topic because it's probably one of the most complicated things. But this is science. They've looked at it. They've looked at it when a pitcher was just sitting, and then they looked at it when a pitcher's actually really throwing. So the forces are really there. So we're holding on to the ball. If that force in the ball, and by the way, they quantify forces. And of course, in physics and in biomechanics, they talk in newtons, which I don't think we all run around with newtons. So of course, I, being normal like you, I break everything down. The hand has to exert about 45 pounds of pressure on the ball when it's behind the pitcher's head to make sure he doesn't lose his grip and have the ball roll. Remember, it's holding the ball. Then as it comes forward, it rolls up and then it releases. So we've got a holding, a rolling, and a release. The ball rolls up too soon on the guy who loses pressure with his hand behind when his hand is behind the head. So this is happening early in acceleration. It rolls up into the fingertips. They can't do what they do, and the ball ends up leaving the fingertips and ending up over the head of the catcher. This also, by the way, guys, in the healthy pitcher is what happens when they start to get tired or when you have a pitcher who can't locate and keep the ball down. It usually, you can take this is what they look at with the forces, but you can take this to the bank when it comes to all levels of pitching, like the kid who's healthy, but he can't locate. The kid who isn't gripping the ball hard enough in that part of the motion, the kid who maybe is getting the yips and it's going up into the bleachers. But you see, this kind of information that we get from science is so awesome to be able to apply. So is it the reason all the time? Probably not. Is it something worth investigating? Absolutely. But you always start with things that we know, then we extrapolate. So we've got the pressure on the hand, then we've got the fingers doing their job so that the ball stays downward. And so we've got those three phases. And we also know that if there is any problem with any part of the release, that we need to look at the fingers and the wrist because it's what we do. It's what you pitching coaches have been doing all the time. So I want everyone to start thinking of the yips as being a disorder of ball release. Okay, it's an incorrect type of ball release. And the things that make you release correctly, so the spin is there correctly. In fact, everyone's looking at spin rate right now. The spin rate is created by the fingers. So if you've got somebody who isn't doing that correctly, meaning the ball isn't spinning correctly, it's not projecting itself correctly, it's not insane to think it has to do with the fingers. So I think that people aren't connecting the dots between what we know about pitching and good pitches and how we create different pitches and when we see a disorder like this, just going right to, oh, well, it's got to be in the hand. It's got to be in the fingers. And there's many reported injuries to the hand and finger that started with the thrower knowing he couldn't throw the ball. In fact, one of the clients that came to me, Joe, I saw that his finger wasn't hanging on to the ball correctly. I could see it lifting off the ball. He didn't know it was lifting off the ball I could see him releasing pressure at the moment of ball release. He was one of the guys who the ball went straight down into the ground. I could actually, with my camera, which isn't as really detailed as some of the biomechanist cameras, but I could see that something was wrong with that. I sent him to the doctor. He ended up with a cast. This was on his middle finger. He ended up on a cast. He had a ligament sprain, which is a different finger than yours, but still both the fingers are important. So everyone, that is why we need to look at this through the fingers. Now, so before I go on, I want to talk about some solutions here and some ways of diagnosing. Joe, did this come clear to you?
It did. And I just want to point out again, in case people didn't hear it before, as a catcher, my fingers on both of my hands were always getting banged up and stretched out and whatever. But at the time when I had this throwing issue, I didn't feel any pain. I just want to make sure people know that there was no pain involved. So if you feel like there's, your Yips condition isn't a physical thing for you because you're not feeling pain. I'm telling you that I did not feel pain throwing a baseball. So I just want to point that out.
Yeah, and they don't feel pain either. That's why no one reports it.
Right.
Everyone thinks. Now, and here's the last thing I want to say about this issue of when you were mentioning, and you're absolutely right. Oh, he went to the big leagues, or Yankee Stadium scared him, or this happened, or that happened. We've got guys that perform well enough to get to that level. Somewhere you have to trust that guy is still in there. I mean, we say this to pitchers all the time. Hey, your skill doesn't go away. Hey, the pitcher you were yesterday when you threw that perfect game, you're going to be that pitcher in a week. Don't worry about it. It's not so transitory that a player can be so great one day and then the next day he's not. If he got to that level, you have to somewhere, and this is where the work I do, I think, is so, I love it because, I believe in these guys. And if a pitcher, and I always talk about good pitchers, when a good pitcher goes bad, you got to look. You got to believe that he's still good. And I want pitchers to know that too. There is always a reason. Just because there's not an arsenal of reasons already set up doesn't mean there's not a reason. The problem is we're dealing with very internal people who've been performing, and they're shocked, first of all, when it starts to happen. And secondly, they don't really have anyone to discuss it with. And plus, it's labeled so quickly. It's another reason to hide it. But here's the deal. These guys, you don't just lose it. It's like if you're walking down the street and all of a sudden your knee gives out and you fall and you get up, and let's say next day it happens again. Means something's wrong. You just don't go, oh no, I'm forgetting how to walk. No, there's a reason why that happens. Players are the same way. So I want everyone to open their minds to that. So have I explained the way the ball comes out of the hand, Joe?
Yes.
Well enough. Okay, great. And as I said, everyone, this is so complicated trying to make it simple. But the main thing is for you to know that that the way the fingers and hand work, it's very specific. The force on the ball has to be specific to handle what's coming at the pitcher as he's going forward. And each knuckle and the way the ball rolls up the hand, that's critical to the fingertips being able to do what they do. Now, the other thing I briefly mentioned is that in muscle physiology, muscles have many ways they act. I mean, they contract. There's certain types of contractions. It's very complicated. That's why I always say an athlete's only as good as a strength coach. If you don't understand the types of contractions that are going on, if a muscle is contracting in a certain direction, or if it's contracting or acting when it's on length, when it's shortened. This is all this complicated stuff that when you study physiology of muscles, you have to learn. I don't expect you to know it, but when you know it and you design exercises, they have to contain the types of sort of actions that muscles go through. And actions is a better way to term what muscles do. They have different actions. and based on the type of way they're shortening or lengthening. So you have to come up with exercises that actually duplicate those kinds of motions, and they can help you in this phase diagnose if a pitcher or a player has trouble doing any of these things because he shouldn't have trouble doing it, but they're also strengthening exercises. The fingers are going through a type of contraction reaction cycle in throwing that they don't really go through in any other way in life. So if you've got a kid who's been doing this since he was 6, yes, when he's in his 20s, he may have something overstretched. It could be a muscle, it could be a tendon, it could be a ligament, but it's using it repetitively in an unusual way. So what we want to do is we want to always have this be a part of normal training. And we also want to use it to rehab someone who's having this problem, if it's rehabable, if it's not something that requires surgery. And we also want to use it to play around with our pitchers that are starting to show, or anyone who's showing that weird thing, like all of a sudden they can't throw 45 feet. And, the guys that I run into with that, they're the interesting ones. They say, yeah, I don't know. All of a sudden I can't throw short distance. Can I just start back at 60 feet? And I'm like, no, I want to see what you do, because it's going to tell me something. And that thing that's wrong may not be showing up when he's at 60 feet, but trust me, it will. The body talks to you in little whispers. You have to listen to it. So that's the first thing. Secondly, you want to really look at these guys that are having this trouble, and you want to kind of experiment. So one of the things that I did, and believe me, all these things that I did, I didn't have a rule book. And this is the gift of me not having been a pitcher and being a sports scientist that really has learned everything from the foundation is in science, but then being around pitchers for all these years and just connecting dots. So what I did, and this was the most telling thing, is on every guy that came to me with this problem, I would have them start to play catch, and the pitch grip that I would ask them to use is a change-up grip. And I would have them use the type of grip where you push the ball in your hand and your fingers are over it, like my younger pitchers would call it a pound ball. When I have looked it up, I think it's called a choke change, but it's where the ball is way back into the hand. It's being stabilized by the fingers in a different way. In other words, he's got more fingers on the ball stabilizing it. He's not just requiring the 2 fingers that you use in a four seam to do all the work. And the thumb is in a very nice position to be able to stabilize. And remember, I said in a 4-seam grip, when the ball is rolling up to the tips, think of the ball rolling. And, everybody needs a baseball in their hand. And yet yesterday I had a ball in my hand all day doing certain things. When you roll the ball from the palm up to the tips, use your left hand to roll it up. Just sit there and do it. You will, of course, see the thumb leaves it first because it's the shortest finger and it's right underneath. When you take the ball into the palm and you grab it this way, you've got everything kind of securing it. So if he's got a weakness in one of the ligaments or tendons, he'll throw a changeup just perfectly. And the way I healed some of my pitchers who by this time were so freaked out that they were scared to throw. And you see, that's why this is diagnosed as mental. You can see it on their face. They're so scared to throw that then they can't even. It's like somebody who's scared to jump. They're not going to jump correctly. Someone who's scared to run, they're not going to be able to lift their legs. Someone who's scared to throw, these are mechanisms inside. But the etiology is not emotional. But by giving them this grip so that I could examine if there was one finger failing out of 5. Now we've got 5 fingers working on the way they're holding the ball, and they would throw beautifully. And so to relax them, I would send them home and they would play catch, but they only could use that grip. Then they came back, and then we were able to start working because I had relaxed his brain. So you have to work delicately once someone's already over the edge. Okay. So using a change up grip is a great way, or whatever you think. So I'm wanting, I love giving you guys ideas. I know all you coaches out there are geniuses on your own right. Use these ideas to figure out if you see any difference. Do whatever it is you think is happening and challenge that difference. And that's the way that I was able to work effectively initially with all the pitchers other than the guy who had surgery. And then the guy who wasn't gripping the ball hard enough, that's why it was going high. The guys that were throwing down into the ground, that's the most serious. The injury there is there's probably a serious injury there or an injury starting. So that's one method that everyone should try. And if you're also having trouble with hitting, you've got to take a look if they're keeping their fingers engaged. In fact, everyone who has my warm-up program, this is why I recommend bands with a handle and not a wrist, because the fingers, and I always talk about it that the muscles insert on the inside of the elbow, but those fingers have to be involved. And when I see people in the gym, pitchers in the gym training, and they're gripping onto the bar, and I'll see the middle finger start to get loose as they're pushing, and it's their habit, then I know I have someone who is not keeping a level grip even on the ball, possibly. And they're the guys whose movement too far to the right, too far to the left. When you see movement patterns on a pitch that are too far to the right, too far to the left, you also want to look at the pressure of those two fingers, because you know that if you don't have the right pressure for that type pitch, you're going to get movement in a direction that you don't want. So this whole thing of watching performance and looking at the hand and thinking about the fingers, it not only is the key to having a good pitcher be even more successful or to have that spin rate that you want, but it's also the key to looking at errors and then severe disorders where the throw can't even happen. Is that not the coolest information ever, Joe? With science providing all this information about the finger pressure, et cetera. Is that not awesome to be able to connect those dots like that?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's something that obviously I never would have thought about, and probably most people wouldn't either.
Yeah, I just it's so exciting for me because the chances of even one player being helped by this or one pitcher is so awesome. So anyway, what I was thinking is I want to talk about the solutions here, or some exercises that you can play around with to diagnose and also strengthen, and also as prevention. So again, if you have my elbow book, which, by the way, Joe will be mentioning at the end, I'm putting that thing on sale again because I want you to, so many people purchase it. For those of you that haven't, the exercises in it are great. So one of the exercises that's in the book, and it's on page 69, is the weighted ball wrist exercise. This exercise actually works with this is the only way I use weighted balls, and it's actually an exercise where you actually hold a four-seam grip, your arms out in front of you, you're supporting it, and it's actually releasing the ball. I just thought of something. I think maybe Wendell should put those pictures up in on YouTube. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so we'll put that up on YouTube so you can see it, but the instructions and everything will be in the book. And so I suggest you get the book. That'd be great. The other exercise that's in the book is the rice bucket, which is critical. It's on page 66, which is critical for working all the intrinsic muscles, meaning the muscles that are just in the hand. And those are two general exercises, which, by the way, if you're doing a weighted ball wrist exercise and you can't perform it correctly, and that's a way for a coach to really stand and see the way the fingers are working, that exercise will be difficult for you. So start with a regular weight ball. And I am going to make sure that exercise with the instruction goes up on YouTube, and also the rice bucket. Now, the other two exercises that I want you to play with. So you have to have a baseball, of course, for this. So one of the because of the fact that the muscles work in an unusual way, you have to think of exercises that are going to help those muscles be able to perform or get better when they're getting fatigued from the kind of unusual contractions that they go through. So one of the things I love to have my pitchers do is to just take a ball in their hand, and they can take any grip they want, and they're just holding the ball the way a normal person might pick up a ball. It might look like the whole hand is spread over the ball, and just have your hand be just out in front of you, and drop the ball out of your hand and then catch it with the hand. So you're doing everything on top of the ball. So you're dropping it and catching it, so it doesn't travel. Let me see. It traveled about 2 inches off my hand. I just did it. Constantly catching it and throwing it back. That way you're getting that kind of reactive kind of contraction that you get. That's one exercise that's great for pitchers. The other thing, and anybody who throws a ball, the other exercise that I love is putting the ball up in front of you. You know how the ball's way out in front of you when you release it? Bring it right in front of you. So like I'm holding it right now, and it's probably at my ear level or my forehead level. It's out in front of my face, but to the right. I'm a righty. And it's about, at forehead level, and it's the hand's right in front. I take my left hand and I put it right in front of it, and then I just throw the ball into my left hand. So I'm just getting some quick work back. I throw it in the left hand, give my right hand the ball back, throw it. And so I'm throwing it, catching it, giving the ball back, throwing it, catching it, give the ball back. So you're just right out in front of you, throwing the ball back and forth. That's a great way to get all the fingers to start working again. And again, they're having to have a quick response to things. And so it starts to match what happens. And you also have to exert a certain amount of force on the ball to keep it from falling out of your hand. On the first exercise, the ball's facing downward. So I have to grip it with a certain amount of force so that I don't drop it. When it rolled up into my fingertips, which is where I'm holding it when I'm doing the little throwing drill right out in front, I have to hold it in a certain way so it doesn't roll downward. So what you're getting is a different sense of how much force you need. This force on the ball is critical to keeping the fingers healthy. Whenever you're using your muscles correctly, and by the way, Joe, just so you know, because you had a torn ligament, the muscles of your fingers started to fatigue to a point to where they couldn't protect the ligament. So when you have that situation going on, you have the danger to the ligament. It's just like when I talk about the forearm. When the forearm gets tired, it can't protect the ligaments of the elbow. So when we're doing these exercises, we're developing a kind of power endurance in the muscles of the fingers and the hand. And it's why I wrote a whole book on, my book, the elbow book, is from the elbow downward to the fingertips. I didn't even deal with the shoulder because this is such a neglected part of the body. But having the muscles be healthy is your number one prevention. And it's the number one thing you want to do to try to figure out if a player can actually heal himself. And of course, for you teams that have doctors and physical therapists and trainers, they can assist with their diagnosis of this. But anyway, so those are 4 things you can do to keep the fingers and the hand healthy and also start to strengthen. And also any of these exercises, if a player has something physical going on, he's going to have trouble doing these exercises. And it's the simplest way to find out what's happening. And also if he does them and then he gets a good response, then you know that some muscle has completely lost its signaling and it's not working at all because it's kind of been disrupted, and the hope of getting it restored is what you would want to do to return him to his performance level. So anyway, that's my whole thing on the yips. So Joe, have I convinced you that it's not mental?
I am 100% certain that at least my issue was not mental, but it does sound like that it starts out as a physical thing and it could manifest itself into something that is also psychological because
absolutely,
because you feel like you can't do something. Once you lose confidence in doing anything, it's going to be, difficult to overcome that.
Yes.
So, there may be a point where the psychology is an issue, but it starts as a physical thing.
Exactly. It gets too far, and it's because of the reasons I said. Remember, whenever you have a tremendous stress disorder, it's going to manifest itself in the body first. And whenever we're thinking about movement or afraid to do a movement, it affects the motor control center, which is responsible for making a movement automatic. So you take the physical, not getting help, not acknowledging that it's physical, thinking it's emotional. The stress gets duplicated. Now you've got two issues to deal with. That's why I love finding a way that the pitcher can throw normally, and also the education. When pitchers come to me freaked out about anything with their pitching, they're totally relaxed by the time they leave because I turn the pitching motion into something concrete and they understand. Oh, I'm on the side of the ball. That's why I'm missing. Or, oh no, they see it on film and they go, oh my, and they're so happy. But when they walked in, they were like, something's wrong and I don't know what. And they're always thinking, okay, the day has come. I'm losing it. I'm losing my skill. And I say, no, you're not going to lose your skill. Your skill's supposed to get better as you do it more. So giving education and answers and hope is the number one thing that we have to do with all of our guys when they are starting to have a problem. So being able to recognize it, and listen, the body tells you right away when you have something wrong. I mean, who throws a ball straight down into the ground when their intent is to throw it straight ahead? I mean, that in of itself, when you think of it that way, you're like, geez, of course something's wrong. A person doesn't just do that. And remember, the first time anything happens, it's not mental at that point. It's what? And they're looking in surprise. It's after about 5 or 10 throws, they start going, oh no, and especially when they have to hide it. So anyway, so I hope that I've done something to help save or give direction to pitchers that suffer from this or coaches who have players who are having a problem with this. And listen, anybody who needs to call me for any clarity on anything I've mentioned in this podcast, please do it. Because as I said, this topic is very near and dear to my heart. Saving dreams, saving careers. It's what it's all about.
Right. And I just want to reiterate something that you said earlier that maybe people didn't hear because they were distracted for one reason or another. You said that you don't just one day wake up and you forgot how to walk. If you stumble or something, you'd never think, oh, I have something mental going on. I forgot how to walk. The first thing you do is find out what's wrong with your leg, your ankle, your foot, or whatever it is. And I just want to bring that up again as kind of a reference point because I'm thinking back to when Chuck Knobloch was having trouble throwing the baseball to first base. And it was almost immediate. It was like, oh, he has Steve Sax syndrome. Like all of a sudden, Chuck Knobloch has been throwing the ball to first base for, 25 years. And just one day he wakes up and he doesn't know how to do it. There's something that just doesn't fly there. So thank you again, Angel, for breaking this down, explaining it and providing solutions. And I really do hope that this helps out at least one person out there.